Well, hey, Cascade Church, coming at you from a slightly different location today. Erica has a doctor's appointment, and since I can't go inside because of COVID, I'm sitting in the car, and I figured instead of staring at the dashboard, I would talk to you about the Bible. And what a wild week in the Bible it's been. The book of Judges gets dark quickly. All the judges, except for Deborah, have downsides to them. You see him slowly deteriorating. Gideon was not a man of faith through the end. Samson, total basket case, but somehow God still loves him. And it all is contrasting with, as we're reading the book of John. I've never read Judges and John at the same time together, and I'm loving it because we see all the darkness in Judges and all the failures. In contrasting that, we see Jesus, we see John the Baptist, we see examples of faithfulness. And just think about Samson versus John the Baptist versus Jesus. Samson and John the Baptist both have the same set of vows over their lives called the Nazirite vows. Now, this is different. Jesus was a Nazarene, meaning he was from Nazareth. Nazirite is a vow set in the book of Numbers where you vow three things over a child: that they'll never cut their hair, that they'll never eat the products of grape, meaning get drunk, they won't have fermented wine, and they won't touch a dead body. Those three things set them apart in a set of holiness. And the only three Nazirites we see are John the Baptist, Samson, and Samuel. We'll get to Samuel in a couple weeks. But John the Baptist is faithful to his vows, and he's in the wilderness baptizing people. And even he, who Jesus says is the greatest of all people who had ever been born, says that he's not worthy of untying Jesus' sandal. Contrast that with Samson. Now, Samson, we always remember Delilah cutting his hair, but that's not the only time he broke his vow. He killed a lion, then he sees food coming out of the lion. There's honey in there, and so he touches a dead body. Vow 1, broken. He marries a Philistine woman, gets drunk, so vow 2, broken. 2 out of 3 are gone. God could have stepped away at any time during this, but God is patient and loving and stays with Samson for his own good and his own glory. And finally, Delilah cuts his hair. Samson is weak, he's blinded, he's captive. And at the very end, God remembers him, and he gets his strength back, and he lays down his own life to secure a short-term victory. As you read Samson, comparing it with Jesus, it's so false, so shallow, so failing. And I see myself a lot closer to Jesus than even to Samson than to Jesus, even not even good enough to be John the Baptist. But that contrast, we see that Jesus fulfilled everything Samson should have been. We see that Jesus fulfills everything Gideon should have been. We see Jesus fulfills everything, even John the Baptist, who says he's not worthy to baptize or untie Jesus' sandal, is pointing us to. So Jesus really is the true and better one. And then what we see in John is just amazing examples of grace. We see Nicodemus coming at night and asking, "What do I do, teacher?" And he's not even brave enough to come to Jesus in the middle of the day. And what Jesus says is some of those most famous words. Tells him about being born again. That's where we get that phrase. But also tells Nicodemus that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but will have everlasting life. And this is how the Bible works. The Bible gets so confusing with stories of Levites chopping up their concubines, Samson having his head shaved, Deborah, who's a good example, the woman at the well. We see all these good and bad examples. And it's very easy to say, don't be like Samson. Be like John the Baptist. Be like Deborah. Don't be like Gideon. But that's not how the Bible works. Yes, we do see instruction for our character, but that's not what saves us. What saves us is that God sent his one and only Son. He didn't just send a law that we would have to live up to. He didn't just send examples, didn't just send kings and priests and prophets. He sent himself. He sent his Son. And if we believe in him, we are saved and will have everlasting life. And this is different than how most religions work, every other religion actually, and how many people read the Bible. Many people read the Bible and they say, if you believe the right things and do the right things and have this life, then you'll be saved. And that's not what it is at all. It's not Jesus and good life. It's not Jesus and good behavior. It's just the gospel of Jesus. That's why in Galatians 1, Paul says, who bewitched you? It's not Jesus and circumcision and Jesus and keeping kosher. It's just the death and resurrection of Jesus. If you believe in that, you've got everything. And we so easily walk away from it. So learn from Samson. Learn from all those other mistakes. And then look to Jesus. Be like Ruth, who, again, she's a good example, but a lot of things happening in Ruth. And isn't that such a delightful little story where you have these people who flee Israel during a time of harvest or time of famine? And again, that's not a great thing. They're supposed to look to God, not to look to Canaan or Philistines or Moab to support them during hard times. And instead of doing that, Naomi's husband flees from God's presence, flees from God's land. They intermarry with Moabites, which they shouldn't have done. And their sons find wives. Ophrah, little trivia for you, Oprah Winfrey wanted to come up with a stage name, so she picked that name from the book of Ruth and misspelled it. And so instead of being Ophrah, she's Oprah and makes a lot of money right now. And then there's Ruth. And Ophrah, when Naomi goes back, stays in Moab, but Ruth says, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And so she's converted, and that's what Israel's all about, is having people, not just genetic Israelites, but people who would follow God, become the true Israel. We're going to see that Ruth becomes one of David's ancestors, becomes one of Jesus' ancestors. This woman of faith is lifted up by God, and it's an amazing story. We'll talk more about it next week. This morning we also saw the woman at the well. And isn't it great how on the same day, after all the tragedies, all the failures, after that horrible story of a Levite and his concubine getting cut up, which was a reenactment of the Sodom and Gomorrah story, but it's not happening in Sodom. It's happening in Israel. It's happening in the tribe of Benjamin. You can just see how corrupt Israel has become and all that. And then you shift and you see Ruth. And then later you see that paralleled with the woman at the well, both women who God approaches. Both women whose husbands weren't where they should have been. One was running from God and then died in Ruth's story. The one at the well had 5 husbands, and the man she had now was not her husband. And Jesus doesn't say, clean up your life and then follow me. Jesus says, let me give you living water. Let me tell you who Messiah is. And this is the first time Jesus claims to be Messiah to a broken woman, to a broken person, to someone who's at the outskirts of society, at the well in the middle of the day. That's grace. That's the gospel. And that's what we should be doing as a church, but also that's what God did for me. He looked into my broken life, and instead of saying, clean yourself up and then you can follow me, stop being like Sampson and Gideon, start being like Ruth and John the Baptist, and then I'll let you follow me. Instead, he meets me at my point of brokenness. For the woman, being at the well in the middle of the day was a place of stigma. Nobody else wanted to be with her. She went there to avoid the gossips and the rumors. You didn't go draw water, a very hard process when the sun was beating down. That was her being in kind of a social exile. And Jesus meets her there, and he loves her, and he makes her an evangelist, gives her a story, good news to share, and her whole town is changed. That can be our story too. Because Jesus brings joy. He is the source of the gospel, good news. And that changes everything. All right. God bless. Pray for Erica. Just a little bit of vertigo going on. Probably an inner ear infection. But figured this was a great opportunity to talk to you. Talk to you all soon. Love you.